Hi everyone and welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're starting our 3-day literature article for English for You. It's called Tuesdays with Maury and it starts at a graduation ceremony. How well do you remember your university graduation, Mike?
I remember it very well because I wasn't there.
Oh, okay. You just happened to be away at the time or didn't feel like being...
I think it was actually a few weeks after school ended, so I kind of had plans already, and I wasn't even in the city. I went away.
Okay. My one for my postgraduate degree was a lot of fun. It was up in Edinburgh in Scotland, and since most of the people graduating were Scottish, all the men were wearing that traditional Scottish kilts and all the rest of the kind of formal gear, which made it look kind of really impressive, made it seem a very fun, formal ceremony. So I have a lot better, fonder memories of that one compared to my undergraduate one, when there was a lot of people on a very hot day.
Yes, having a lot of men with hairy legs and skirts makes any event much more special. Did you wear a kilt?
I did not. I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing so. I'm not Scottish. I don't have Scottish family. So it wouldn't have really been right for me to wear a kilt on that day. But let's look at what happens at the graduation ceremony that starts off this story by reading through day one.
Reading Tuesdays with Maury. The ceremony ended, and we threw our caps into the air. It was official. We were the graduating class of 1979. I went over to my favorite professor, Maury Schwartz. Tears appeared in his eyes as I gave him a gift, a leather briefcase with his name on it. "You are one of the special ones, Mitch," he said, and asked me to stay in touch. I promised that I would stay in touch, but time passed and I forgot about Maury. Then one evening, 16 years later, his face appeared on television. It was an episode of Nightline, and seeing him there moved me. I decided it was time for me to reach out to Maury, so I flew to his home in Massachusetts, US. Some years before, he'd found out he had ALS, a disease that would slowly weaken his body. Maury was used to an active life, though, and still enjoyed guests, so he welcomed me with open arms.
So our story starts right in the middle of some action. It begins, the ceremony ended, and we threw our caps into the air. Of course, this is a traditional thing to do at graduations. You have those special graduation caps, or we sometimes call them mortar boards, and you throw them into the air and take a picture, and it's all very happy. And graduation is one type of ceremony. A ceremony is any kind of formal celebration or party to mark a special moment, like a wedding ceremony, graduation ceremony, maybe a ceremony to show that somebody has become like an adult, something like that. They've kind of gone from being a child into an adult. It would be a special occasion with a lot of traditions and other things associated with it. Okay, so we've got this big party going on. What else do we see?
Right, so the first sentence kind of creates an image in our minds, and then we learn a little bit more about exactly what's happening in the next sentence, which says, "It was official. We were the graduating class of 1979. So there we go. Yes, it is a university graduation ceremony. This is back in 1979. And when we say something was official, well, for something to be official, that means it's kind of important in some kind of way. And there's some group or organization that's saying, yes, this is true, this is real. We are agreeing with what you're saying. You have the authority, you have the right to say this, all right? We can actually use this word as a noun if we talk about a government official. This is someone with some kind of power to do things, to, enforce laws or give us rights or permission. So if something is official, we have gotten those rights. We have gotten that permission. And officials at a university or in a government would say, yes, that is okay. You get the stamp, you get the thing, you are allowed to do this, you are allowed to say this. So basically, if we're talking about leaving school, if it's official, maybe at the end of your final test, you can say, I graduated, but it might not be quite official yet until you get the diploma, until you get back all of your grades. Then it's official. Then you can say, I graduated, and no one will be able to say, well, or but. It's official. It's true. It is actually a fact. For example, your passport is an official government document.
Okay, so let's move on in the story. All the students are celebrating, having a great time, and the narrator, the writer, we don't know this person's name just yet. We'll learn it later. It says, I went over to my favorite professor, Maury Schwartz. Okay, and to go over to somebody basically means you're on one side of the room, they're on maybe the other side of the room, and you just cross that space in order to speak to them, in order to get close to them. You're approaching them basically because you weren't sitting next to each other to start off with. There was some distance and you crossed that distance. But what do we mean by professor?
Well, a professor is a teacher at a university. A professor is probably a doctor, probably has a PhD. And generally, when we think of professors, we think of teachers at universities. You might call your high school teacher professor if they're a doctor, but generally, this is a word we would use for a university teacher. So if you meet someone and they say, I'm a professor, you can probably safely assume they mean a teacher at a university. For example, Mr. Andrews was a professor who taught geography at my university.
So let's move on to the next sentence in the article, and we see that it says, tears appeared in his eyes as I gave him a gift. A leather briefcase with his name on it. We'll describe what a briefcase is in just a moment, but we do know it's made of leather. Okay, leather is a product that's made from animal skin, usually cow, but it can be other animals. It's been treated to make it tougher, but also shinier. Leather products generally look quite high class. They're often black, they're often quite cool looking. Here's an example of one. Ron always wears a leather jacket when he rides his motorcycle. Of course, leather is tough, so if he falls off, this jacket will help protect him, but it also looks cool.
And when you have a briefcase, this type of bag, it might be something you would use for 5, 10, 15 years, as long as it is in good condition, because a briefcase is a bag that we often associate with business people, and it's for carrying things like papers and books and pens and stuff like that. A briefcase is not the kind of bag you would take on a holiday because they might be a little bit long, but they're quite narrow. They're not very big, and certainly you couldn't put a jacket into a briefcase. They're mainly designed for papers and books and things like that. And when we think of your typical businessman going to work, well, some of them might carry like a knapsack or a book bag these days, but traditionally they would be carrying a briefcase, often made of leather, for their books, computers, pens, things like that. So this is something that the student is giving to his professor, Maury, basically just as a gift, and also something he can use around the school when he wants to carry his papers around.
So this is quite a touching moment between a student and a professor. You know, it's a special gift. You don't have to give this to your teacher, your favorite professor, but the guy has chosen to. And that moves Maury. We see in the next sentence of the article that you are one of the special ones, Mitch, he said, and asked me to stay in touch. So now we know that Mitch is the guy telling this story. That's his name. It's his story about Maury and about his life with him, his experiences with him. And Maury wants him to stay in touch after they part ways after graduating. To stay in touch or to keep in touch is basically to keep communicating with that person. You call them sometimes, you send them emails or other messages, text, social media. You plan to meet up. You basically just stay in contact rather than kind of go your separate ways and don't really meet again unless by chance.
So Mitch agrees. He wants to stay in touch as well. And next we read, I promised that I would stay in touch. Okay, so yeah, we know from this, Mitch is like, okay, I will do that. And we kind of get the feeling that he really means okay. He will do that. This isn't just something he's saying to make Maury happy and then he'll forget in a few months. No, because he promised that he would stay in touch. And when you promise this verb, we could also use it as a noun for these special words you say. But when you're promising, you're saying special words that you want a person to believe. You really mean what you're saying. You're kind of, putting it on the record, as we might say. Trust me, believe me. These words I'm saying, you don't have any reason to kind of say, is that true? Do you really mean that? No, because I promise I will do that. It's like putting your hand over your heart and saying, I swear, trust me, this is totally true. For example, Nigel promised his daughter that he would get her a puppy for her birthday.
However, these kind of promises aren't always easy to keep. It's difficult to always keep in touch with everybody as time goes by, and that's what happens here. The article says, but time passed and I forgot about Maury.
He's a liar. Well, no, he's not. That's just how life goes, right? Sometimes we do make promises, and at that time, and maybe for a few years afterwards, he did stay in touch, but, a lot of time goes by, and it can be hard to keep promises like that for a very long time. So then in the story, we jump ahead, or we jump forward by quite a few years, because next it says, then, one evening, 16 years later, his face, that's Professor Maury, his face appeared on television. So yeah, we get the feeling that Mitch and Maury, they haven't stayed in touch over this time. And this sort of comes back to Maury. He gets reminded of this 16 years later, not from a letter or a phone call or someone saying, hey, I saw that professor. No, he saw his teacher on television. His face, Maury, basically, was on television. That's kind of interesting. What was he doing on television?
Well, we find out in the next sentence of the article, we see it was an episode of Nightline, and seeing him there moved me. So we know it's an episode, and this is a word we use for a lot of TV shows, pretty much any TV show. An episode is one kind of part of a longer story. You might have a drama series with 6 or 12 or 24 episodes. Each one tells a little bit of a story, moves it along, brings in a new character or removes them, kind of does that sort of thing. So this is a long series. I don't know what Nightline is. We don't have this in the UK, but I think it's a call-in show. People make phone calls to it.
It's a nighttime news show. It's a nighttime news show in America. Yeah.
Well, he was obviously talking or appearing on that show, and it moved him. It kind of really affected him emotionally to see his professor there.
So next we read, I decided it was time for me to reach out to Maury. All right. So yeah, this was that little push that he needed to make him reach out, or we could also, using that other expression, to get back in touch with Maury. But to reach out means to make that first phone call, to sit down and actually write that email, right? So you're sort of making the first step or reaching out your hand in the way that you might do the same thing when you want to shake someone's hand.
We also see the grammar point for today's article in this sentence, it plus a be verb plus time for someone to do something. And you can omit the for and person part. And this sentence is used to indicate that the correct time for something that happens or something to happen has come. It's almost too late, but it isn't too late right now. It will be too late if you delay again, but it's certainly, this is the time. You should act now. This thing should happen now. Now, in this sentence, it is a dummy pronoun. It's not referring to a person or a thing in particular, but we do need it to make the sentence kind of hang together, make sense, give it a kind of subject. So here's another way we can use it. It's time for you to forgive Susan for what happened. And that would mean, okay, maybe you're angry, but enough time has passed. It's time for you to forgive her and move on with your life. Okay, so our guy Mitch wants to reach out again to Maury. We see, so I flew to his home in Massachusetts, US. So that's up in the northeast corner.
Some years before, he'd found out he had ALS, a disease that would slowly weaken his body. Okay, that's maybe another reason to go see the person. They're quite sick. And I know with ALS, or is that amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or something like that? It's a very serious disease. It will end up killing people. Famously, that Dr. Stephen Hawking, that great scientist from the UK who was in a wheelchair for many years, he had it. He lived a long time with it, but it definitely affects your ability to speak, to write, to do things like that. Your mind is fine, but your body is getting weaker and sort of not working very well as the disease goes on. So as it says, this disease would weaken his body. And yeah, for him to talk or to write and things like that would be difficult. It is a very terrible disease. And what is a disease? Well, basically, it's just a sickness that people get. Sometimes we can spread diseases like COVID or a cold or a flu. Sometimes other diseases we just get, like cancer or heart disease, maybe because of how you live or what you eat or what you do or just the way your body was created. But basically, this is a sickness inside your body that makes you sick in some kind of way. It could be serious, it could be minor, it could be really bad, it could be something you can fix by just taking some medicine, but it's basically a sickness. But some diseases, of course, can weaken you greatly, diseases like ALS, or maybe diseases that can give trouble or bring sickness to animals. We would use the same word, and our example sentence says, the disease spread quickly through the farm, and soon many animals were sick. Yeah, of course, animal diseases on farms can also be pretty terrible.
Yep, and if a disease weakens you, it kind of affects your muscles, your body. You become less strong. You have less power. You can't move around or do things as easily as before. Okay, so how did this affect Maury?
Okay, so we find out a bit more about how this disease is affecting Maury. It says Maury was used to an active life, though, and still enjoyed guests, so he welcomed me with open arms. Okay, so even though he has ALS, which, as we said, is a serious disease, he was still healthy enough to welcome friends. When you welcome someone with open arms, it's like you're ready to give them a hug. You're really happy to see them. You're not like, well, you can come, but only for 10 minutes. No, you're like, yeah, come, sure. It would be great to have you. Stay as long as you want. You make them feel very welcome because he was used to an active life. Even though he's sick now, he still wants to try to live an active life because that's what he's used to. So to be verb used to, a noun or a verb ing, basically that means what you feel is normal, what has become common or regular or sort of part of your life. You know, a lot of times when people travel, one of the things they find difficult about going to a new place is the food. If you go to a new country and they eat really different food, you might say, oh, my stomach's not good. I'm not used to eating so much spicy food, for example. Your body will change. You will get used to it. You will get comfortable with it, but you're not used to it now. And when we say I'm used to something, that's what feels right. That's what feels comfortable. That's what feels normal.
So what's normal for Maury is receiving guests, and a guest is somebody who comes to a place to visit. You could have guests staying for a few days. You could talk about someone being a guest in a hotel or a guest in a country. Either way, as long as they're not staying permanently, if they're just staying for a short time, they are a guest. For example, we could say, Linda made her guests feel comfortable by offering them a drink and a snack. And we know that Maury welcomes Mitch, and Mike has kind of explained what this means to welcome somebody with open arms, to just receive them in a really friendly way, basically to say, just treat this house like it was your house. Enjoy yourself. Get something from the fridge if you want a snack. Okay, well, we're going to see what happens with Maury and Mitch a bit later in tomorrow's article, but right now we're going to go to today's For You Chat question.
You chat.
Okay, so our For You Chat question is actually kind of talking about what Mitch was saying about Maury, right? Mitch was saying that Maury Schwartz was his favorite professor. So we're just going to ask in a more general way, not just about university. Pat, do you or did you, since you're not a student now, did you have a favorite teacher? And what makes that teacher or what makes them special to you?
Good question. Yeah, I think definitely for my last couple of years of school, my favorite teacher was my drama teacher, Miss Redgate. She was very encouraging. She really kind of pushed me to, do better, do different stuff. But she also allowed me to kind of, she knew what I liked in terms of what kind of roles I wanted to play. So she made sure I had a chance to play them on stage and also for my final drama assessment. But she was also great because when she was running a whole play with lots of students, she knew how to scare everybody and really make them kind of pay attention and really focus on what they should be doing. She would do it usually a few weeks before the performance. She would just tear into everybody, even if they were doing well, and just make the cast really, really focused and doing their best. It was fantastic how she could just get everybody like that. But not scare you like by jumping out and going boom,
but just scaring you by saying, oh, you're going to be on stage and you'll look really stupid, so you should work harder.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And did it work usually?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah?
We did what she asked every time. But yep, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for watching, everyone. For English For You, I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
Join us again for part 2 tomorrow. Bye.
Vocabulary Review.
Official. It's official. Italy won the final soccer game against England earlier this year. Professor. Music history was a really fun university course, and the professor taught us a lot. Leather. Leather seats are often comfortable, but some people don't like them because they're made from animal skin. Promise. Sally promised Mike she'd watch a movie with him last night, so Mike was upset when she canceled. Disease. Jason was in the hospital because he caught a serious disease, but he managed to recover quickly. Guest. Mary invited many guests to her wedding as she wanted lots of people to celebrate with her.
智慧小补帖
Ceremony. Briefcase. Episode.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net